Hello and welcome to IB Economics. Today we are continuing on with our market failure topic, and specifically today we're going to be looking at negative externalities of consumption. Okay, so still looking at the externalities topic within market failure, specifically negative externalities of consumption. Okay, so we know from last time that a private benefit is gained by consumers from the consumption of goods and services, but the consumption of certain goods and services can create an external cost, a negative externality, that spill over from private consumption, and that's got to be paid for by third parties. And negative externalities of consumption refer to the external cost created by the consumers during the course of using the product or the service. Classic example is smoking. So price, benefit and cost in dollars on the y-axis, quantity of cigarettes consumed on the x-axis, demand, supply. Supply equals the marginal private cost, which equals the marginal social cost, and demand equals the marginal private benefit in this model. Now we know that the marginal social benefit of cigarette smoking is much lower than the marginal private benefit, and that's because of these external costs. So the additional benefit of consuming one more unit of a good or service is a marginal private benefit. So each extra ciggy that's consumed here produces a marginal private benefit to the consumer of the cigarette. The additional external benefit obtained or harm caused by consuming that extra unit of the good or service is a marginal external benefit. Therefore, we have marginal social benefit is equal to the marginal private benefit plus that marginal external benefit. So therefore, the negative externalities of consumption result in the MSB, the marginal social benefit curve, being below and to the left of the marginal private benefit curve. This is because smokers are affecting other parties. Secondhand smoking causes health issues in other people. Lost productivity at work, smokers are generally sicker, and added healthcare costs to society. So yes, cigarette consumption negatively affects others. The benefit gained by the private consumer is more than the benefit obtained by society as a whole. So therefore, marginal social private benefit is less than the marginal private benefit. The allocatively efficient point of a consumption, which is Q star, is less than the market determined outcome, the free market determined outcome, QE. In the free market, QE is achieved because the price of cigarettes is too low, and at that low price, too many cigarettes have been consumed, and the deadweight loss here, the yellow triangle, shows the total welfare loss associated with this market. Now, the different ways that we can correct for a negative externality of consumption, the first being regulation. And smokers will be familiar with this. You can't buy cigarettes in most countries, most states, if you are under the age of 18. So a government can regulate to correct a negative externality of consumption. So regulating cigarettes to be sold to those only aged 18 and above. Cigarettes can't be smoked in workplaces, they can't be smoked in cafes, bars and restaurants. And together, all of this is going to reduce the demand for cigarettes. A demand curve will decrease from D1 equals the marginal private benefit until it overlaps with D2, our marginal social benefit, which is our socially desirable level of demand, where the externality has been eliminated. As we say, that's internalizing the externality. As demand decreases, the important effect is that QE decreases to Q star, and unimportantly, price reduces from PE to P star as producers lower their prices to reduce the surplus of the demerit good, that surplus being excess supply. So here we have that in action. Government regulations reduces demand to the point where demand equals the marginal social benefit. Those external costs have been internalized. And Q star is the socially desirable amount of consumption in the market. This is the efficient market equilibrium. Another way that we can correct for a negative externality of consumption is advertising. Governments will often run advertising campaigns trying to persuade consumers from purchasing a product. We see this in adverts such as anti-gambling, anti-alcohol, anti-smoking advertisements are all examples of campaigns that you can see in many, many countries. Health campaigns and advertisements that show the harm cigarettes will reduce the demand for cigarettes, and the demand curve is going to decrease, just as we saw before with the regulation. It's going to reduce from D1, the marginal private benefit, until it overlaps with D2, our marginal social benefit. And again, that's a socially desirable level of demand where the externality has been internalized. As demand decreases, the more you see horrid pictures of people with lung cancers and black lungs and the terrible health effects, the dirty teeth, the poor circulation, demand for cigarettes is reduced. And as that demand decreases, the important effect is that QE decreases to Q star, and unimportantly, price reduces from PE to P star as producers lower their prices to reduce the surplus of the demerit good. So PE is the efficient P star is the efficient market equilibrium. And here is an essential statement to wow your IB examiners. The allocative efficient point of consumption is where MSB equals MPC. One way that negative externalities of consumption can be internalized is by decreasing the demand for the product and shifting the marginal private benefit curve to the left, where it overlaps with the marginal social benefit curve. And that can be achieved through advertising or government regulations. Memorize that, bring it out in exam time, bump up your marks. Excise taxes. Excise taxes are a form of indirect tax. So by charging or taxing the producer at a rate equal to the marginal external cost, the marginal social cost curve becomes a market supply curve. The market price rises, the quantity produced decreases to the efficient quantity, and the government will collect tax revenue on such a tax. Now that tax results in supply decreasing, we get in that tax per unit, supply decreases, marginal social cost equals the marginal private cost plus the per unit tax. Price increases, quantity demanded decreases, government collects tax revenue, and if the excise tax is exact, precise, then it can reduce consumption to the allocatively efficient market equilibrium. So the tax results in supply decreasing, shifting up and to the left from supply equals MPC to supply equals MSC. If the tax equals the external cost, the MPC plus the tax curve intersects with the marginal private benefit at the optimal, allocatively efficient Q star level of sales. Demand curve doesn't shift. It remains at D equals marginal private benefit, but the equilibrium quantity demanded falls as the price of the good or service increases. Essential statement here. Again, you're trying to impress your IB economics examiner. lay this on him or her. The other way to internalise a negative externality of consumption is to place an indirect excise tax on a good or service. This is not just going to decrease the demand for the demerit good. The higher price will decrease the quantity demanded for the demerit good. So there's a key distinction there. It's not decreasing demand, but it's decreasing the quantity demanded of that demerit good to a quantity equivalent to that achieved when marginal social benefit equals marginal private cost. The excise tax placed on the demerit good shifts the MSC left to a point where it intersects with MPB directly in line with the allocatively efficient market equilibrium.